Hello, my name is Edward Sayegh, and I got 17th place at the Las Vegas Regional playing True Draco Zoo. The reason why I picked True Draco Zoo is because I wanted to play Masterpiece, because Masterpiece is a really good monster all around. It gives you disruption on your opponent's turn, and it's just generally really hard to get around. Just the problem with True Draco, the pure True Draco deck itself, is that it just minuses way too hard to actually summon Masterpiece. I've tried it with different builds, Invoked, the Wind Witch, Pure, just you really minus off of it. Whereas if you have the Zoodiacs are still a really good engine to gain card advantage, and they combo well because you can pop your Dead Tenkies or your Rams or your Bunny Blast with a diagram. So essentially, you're getting all these searches without actually losing any cards. The main difference now compared to before with the Zodiac part of the engine is just the fact that before you had Brobble, which was first of all an instant detach for an Xyz material, which would set up Chalk9 by itself, and it was also getting you a zoo either for Whiptail on your opponent's turn or just to summon on your next turn a different zoo monster. So the main difference now is that all your zoo combos start off for the first turn, they're like 2 card combos. So you're usually using Thoroughblade. But after that 2 card combo, they become 1 card combos all over again, just like before, because then any zoo will get you a Tiger Mortar, which will make it big, and then a Chakanine to get another monster back. So it's just the initial setup requires 2 cards now versus 1 before. But for the rest of the duel, it's still 1 card, and they're really good for recursion and just gaining card advantage off diagram. So the Zoo Engine by itself, though, just doesn't have the disruption without Dryden. They just summon beat sticks and they don't do anything on your opponent's turn, which is where the Masterpiece comes in. It gives you the disruption that you lost from not having Dryden. So that's the main gist of it. And I'm going to go over the deck list and go over certain things as they come along. So starting off with the main deck, played 2 Masterpiece because that's just the right number. 3 would obviously be too much, and 1 wouldn't be enough. I went into 2 a lot during the event, and if I ever used the desires, I want to make sure I at least had 1 left just to seal away games. But I really didn't want to play less than 2. For the other True Draco card, I played 1 Ignis Heat. Played Ignis Heat because I want to play a 3rd Tribute Summon monster just so I'd have an excuse to reasonably play a few more of the True Draco spells and traps because they are really good to toolbox off diagram and whatnot. But I didn't want to play another Masterpiece because that obviously requires 2 tributes, which would clog. So I played 1 Ignis Heat instead because it's just the next best one. It came up a few times in testing, but I never summoned it at the event. So I guess if you want to cut it, you could. As far as the Zoo Engine goes, I played 3 Thoroughblade. This is the most important one. This is what I was talking about earlier about how everything starts off as a 2 card combo. Because you summon Thoroughblade, you discard a Zoodiac, and then that's automatically setting you up for a Chakanine, and you didn't lose a card off of it because you just drew off Thoroughblade. So that's really good. Thoroughblade kind of gets the engine started. And after you resolve him once, the rest of your Zoodiac plays are 1 card plays. Then there's 2 Whiptail. He doesn't really contribute to the uh, engine as much. He's just there because he has a generically good effect. He outs problem things. If you're able to bait Sleeper, then you can tack over it with something that has a Whiptail under it, and it'll get around Last Resort and Spiral Resort because it doesn't target or destroy. It's non-targeting, banishing, removal. Then there's 2 Ram, and the 1 Bunny Blast kind of combos off with it. You could play 1 Ram just because early game you're mostly going to go into Bunny Blast just to get the zoos back in your hand because you don't want to just special summon them on your opponent's field on your opponent's turn because since you don't have anything to protect them unless you have Masterpiece out, they can just destroy them and then you just essentially didn't gain anything off Ram. But Bunny Blast will put it back in your hand so you can use it next turn. Ram is still essential at 2 though because with Diagram, if you already have zoos in the graveyard, which you most likely will, you can use it in tandem with Diagram to act like a pseudo barrage. It gives you an extra push for that turn. It gives you an extra summon, which is really important. So 2 is definitely the right number. I don't think 1 is enough, and 3 would just be way too many. And then the last zoo is just 1 Rapier. Rapier, you don't really go into her as much. She's just kind of there as like a failsafe if you don't open like a Thoroughblade plus another zoo, or you just don't open enough zoos but you open Tenki, then you can send a Zoodiac from your deck to the graveyard to still do the same combos you would if you had a Thoroughblade and another Zoodiac. Just the thing is that your monsters are going to have 0 attack because Rapier has 0 attack, versus if you had Thoroughblade, they'd be a decent enough beat stick. So she's kind of, you don't really want to go into her as much. It's just there if you don't open optimally, just to make sure you never brick, because this deck really doesn't brick like ever. So that's the Zoodiacs. Then for kind of like the honorary Zoodiac, the last monster before hand traps are 3 Balbaboon. Balbaboon's just really good in tandem with Barrage and Diagram. It's almost never dead. It's, if you see it and you can resolve it, you're usually just in an amazing position, because you just have so many resources coming your way. MX Saber Invoker is really good to toolbox any Zoodiac you want from your deck. He's really easy to clear via Diagram, Barrage, linking into Mrs. Radiance, or tributing for Masterpiece, so that's never a problem. One good thing about Balbaboon is that if you have Balbaboon plus Barrage and Terraforming or Diagram against certain decks, like say for instance Spirals, and I know this sounds like, wow, you open really nutty, but it happens. You do play 6 Diagrams, so it happens more often than you'd think. You can play Barrage and Balbaboon, and it doesn't even have to be Barrage. It could actually just be double Diagram too. Mainly if you open Balbaboon in a way to bait out Sleeper, because if they see this, like Balbaboon Diagram, and then they pop the Diagram, and you have like a Terraforming or another way to get to Diagram, then they're not going to pop Balbaboon because they don't want you to special summon 2 more. So then you just play the second Diagram, you pop the Balbaboon, and you just start comboing off from there. So it's good because it baits Sleeper out and makes them only pop 1 card, and then you can combo off just the same afterwards. And so that usually works out really well. Balbaboon is just really good in that sense. It increases the ceiling of the deck, because between Balbaboon, Barrage, your extra tribute summon, your normal summon, and potentially even popping Ram, you have like 4 different ways of summoning monsters in the turn, which helps you play through a lot of traps. Then for the hand traps, play 3 Ghost Ogre and 1 Maxi. I would play Ashes, but I just don't have the money for it. So I played something else in the spell and trap card zone. So, but I'll just let you know what that is, and you can just take that out for Ashes if you have it. They were alright. Ghost Ogre was really dead against Trickstars, but it was good against everything else. Then played 3 Diagram and 3 Terraforming. These are really important because, like I was saying earlier, the Zoodiacs, they're good for gaining card advantage and just an overall strong engine. But the problem is that without Trident, they have no disruption on your opponent's turn. And this really helps you get to Masterpiece, but more so when you get to pop like Ram and Bunny Blast and Balbaboon. Like, this is play extenders all day. Like, this gives you multiple pushes. Like, having multiple Diagrams isn't even bad, because you can resolve it so many times in one turn and get multiple summons off of it. It just really increases the ceiling of the deck, which is really, really important. Then next, I'm going to put these together. These are kind of the reason why the Zoo engine is still viable even without Broad Bull. It's because between Barrage and Tenki, you have so many ways of getting to any Zoo you want. Like, you have 6 copies and 3 copies of Throwblade. So it's like you have 9 copies of Throwblade, then you just need any other Zoo. So that pretty much means that the 2-card combo thing I was talking about is still really consistent in the TCG, because you have all these ways of searching out the Zoo cards. Whereas in the OCG, they don't have as many, so it's not as viable. But these really help. They make it consistent turn 1, and then after that, it plays the same as before. Then this is the card you can replace with Ashes. I played 3 Cosmic Cyclones because I didn't want to get Ashes, too poor. Also, I didn't want to play Droll Lock or other things. One, because they're expensive, but also because I felt like they were too niche. They didn't work out as well in all matchups, just in a few. And this one was the best, like, quote-unquote trap that I felt like kind of blanket all the matchups. So I decided to play this. But if you have Ashes, you can play that instead. Then for spells, there's 2 Desires. Desires is good. It usually got me there, but I don't know how much I like it because usually when it did get me there, I didn't really need to get me there. Like I didn't need two cards. I just needed the one Desires to be another any other card, just so I could have a full hand of cards. Just because this deck does toolbox a lot out of the deck between Diagram, Barrage, Tenki, Rapier, you're constantly going into the deck. So sometimes this is a little annoying, but at the same time, there aren't really any other two cards I want to play in the deck, and I don't want to ruin the deck's consistency by just playing two filler cards. Then, to end it off, there's the True Draco Spells and Traps. I played two Heritage, one Apocalypse, and one Return. I played two Heritage because it does come up where you can pop, destroy a spell or trap, then search another one, draw a card, or mainly because I'm playing Ignis Heat, so you could do the whole thing where you tribute, then you search another one. If they outed the Ignis Heat and you tributed another True Draco card, then you draw two cards, so that's really good. Then I played two of the trap cards. I thought it was really important to play two trap cards because, for instance, if you have, just gonna put Maxi here as just like a random card to have. If you have a monster and you have these two, then you start your turn like this. It can just be a set monster. You flip over return during their standby phase. Then when they do something, you activate Apocalypse. Then you use Apocalypse's effect to destroy return, and then you got one pop. Then you can use Apocalypse effect for the extra tribute summon, and you tribute for Masterpiece on their turn, and that's another pop. Then you have two continuous traps in your graveyard to use Masterpiece's effect, so you get one more pop, and that's three disruptions, and you end with a Masterpiece that's unaffected by monster effects. So by then the game state is like super simplified, and you have like the best monster in the game. So you're in a really good position if you resolve that. Going for second though, I did side out one. I usually sided out Apocalypse just because return does come up a little bit in the grind games. And then going first, I always sided out one Heritage and one Ignis Heat because they're mainly going second cards. And then going into the extra deck, I played 3 Zoodiac Chakanine and 3 Zoodiac Tiger Mortar. These are the three most important ones because Chakanine is what gets you card advantage and makes Diagram like valuable every turn, not just the first turn, because you can bring back Ram, bring back Bunny Blast, and just gain value all the time. So she's like the most important one, but then Tiger Mortar is also important. I don't know if she's as important, but almost equally as important because without Tiger Mortar, your monsters would be really small. She's what gives your like 1600 Zoodiac Xyz the extra 1200, extra 1600 from the graveyard to make them actual beat sticks and a threat. So she's also really important. Then Borbo is also there. He's oftentimes just an extra Xyz material, but having two of them is also really good just because you can't attack directly with him. It just ignores game states completely. If they have a fat board and you can just bait out one thing, then you can attack directly and game them out of nowhere. I gamed someone for 3k with Borbo, so that was kind of cool. Then there's Hammer Kong. Hammer Kong is absolutely just an Xyz material and nothing else. You don't do the old play where you'd have him brought back off Chakanine and equip anything with him with Tiger Mortar, just because without Broad Bull, you don't really have the extra zoo to make your Xyz big. So you want to actually equip the Xyz, the extra material from your graveyard, to the Tiger Mortar itself, as opposed to the Hammer Kong. Otherwise, your Tiger Mortar is just going to be really small. It's going to get run over anyway, so it doesn't matter if it can be targeted or not. So Hammer Kong just is Xyz materials. Then for the rest of Xyz, there's one MX Saber Invoker for Balbaboon, just generically really good. I said it earlier, he's really easy to clear, and he gets extra summons. Then one Break Sword if you're going second, or late if you just get Balbaboon later in the game, because it's just a generally good card, but you can pop one of your True Draco spells and traps to get 2 pops on their side of the field. You can pop a Ram to get a special summon and pop. You can pop Bunny Blast to get add back to your hand and pop. It just combos really well with a lot of cards in this deck. Then the last Xyz I played was one Baguska, just because I wanted to play one other rank 4 in the deck that wasn't a Zoodiac, just in case I had 2 Zoos on the field that weren't brought back by Chakanine. he's just the only one that I felt was really worth it because he's just generically really good and he's really ignorant with Masterpiece because Masterpiece is unaffected by him. So you could sit on this guy for like 2 turns and just keep popping cards on their field every turn and attacking every turn while they just can't do anything. So this is really good and really ignorant with Masterpiece. Then there's 2 Mrs. Radiance, and this is just to help unclog your field, and it just also gives you a lot of recursion, so it just helps. It's a really good card. And then for the side deck wasn't really useful except for the last 3 cards. There's 2 Unending Nightmare. I never drew them, so I don't know if it was good. In theory, it's good because it's a continuous trap, so I contributed for Masterpiece. Then I played 2 Warnings and 1 Strike. These would have been D barriers, but I left my D barriers at home, and home is a long way from Vegas, so these are just the next best thing. And I never really saw them. I saw them once, but they got twin twisted in an irrelevant matchup. Then I played 3 Spell Shattering Arrows. This was for Magicians, but also for Spirals, because I figured if I could clear Last Resort and I could clear the Spiral Resort, then I could out the Sleeper really easily by just making like 1 or 2 pushes past the pop effect. And then if I could do that and end with a Masterpiece, then hopefully the duel would go for my way after that. I never really saw it, so I don't know if it would ever work. Then I played Dark Hole and Regeki. They weren't really useful either. I only sided them in against Trickstar, not because I really thought they were great against Trickstar. I just sided them in because I wanted to take certain cards out, and I didn't really have many other cards in the side deck to put in for that matchup. So there's those 2. Then 2 Kaijus, never sided them, but I just have to have at least 2 Kaijus in the side deck. Then I played 3 Veilers. This is like the only card that I consistently sided in and actually did a lot of good for me the entire event. It's just a really good card. If it weren't for Spirals having Spiral Resort protecting all their stuff from targeting, I would main it over Cosmic just because I really like this card. It's just generally good. There was a match against the Trickstar player where they summoned the Utopia the Lightning, and they were gonna attack over one of my monsters, Mrs. Radiance, to do like a ton of damage in turns. And when they ended their main phase, like I went on declaration of ending their main phase 1, I effect veilered their lightning. So that way when they attack over Mrs. Radiance, I'd take like a negligible amount of life point damage, and I would still get the float effect. And then next turn, I just made a beefy like 2800 defense Chakanine and a Ram under it for floating, and they couldn't game me in turn. So I actually managed to beat Trickstars in turns with this card, which is kind of cool, but I end up losing to turns against them in another duel. So the matchups I played, round 1 was Gren Manju OTK. I lost game 1 actually because they just opened really well, and that was like the one hand where I didn't open like that great. But then game 2 and 3 I just beat them because it's not the greatest deck ever. It's more of like a fun deck, Gren Manju. Game 2 I played against Magicians, and that game me and all my friends and my brother actually got a game loss because we just didn't hear the announcements. We're used to like in Los Angeles they make a big announcement for it, but they didn't hear. So I lost game 1, but then game 2 and 3 I managed to win. Then round 3 was against Spirals. Game 1 I actually was in a winning position, but I misplayed just out of lack of practice. I've solitared hundreds of times with this deck, so like I know my own deck like in and out, but I don't know the other decks in the format well enough. I didn't practice enough. So he had a double Helix on the field, and from what I practiced like once or twice the day before against one of my friends, he outed Masterpiece with a Borreload. So I kind of just tunnel visioned Borreload, and not realizing that he could just summon Drone from the deck with double Helix. And then he set it up so he'd have two super agents, and that kind of just made things bad for me with the Drone. So I lost game 1, but then game 2 I ended up winning that, and that took really long for both of us, game 1 and 2. So and then we ended up just drawing. That was one of the draws. And then after that, I played against a Trickstars player. That was the one I was talking about with the Utopia the Lightning. It grinded out really long. It was a 2-0. I couldn't believe I beat Trickstars in turns. Not as consistent as I'd hoped though, because I would end up losing to Trickstars in turns later. The next matchup after that was against my brother playing Lightsworns. It was a good duel. There wasn't really any like huge crazy moments. We just kind of went back and forth. I won game 1, he won game 2, then I won game 3. Then next matchup after that was against Burning Abyss Infernoids, and the Infernoids actually have a surprisingly really good matchup against this deck, just because I'm constantly trying to pull things out of the graveyard with Ram and Bunny Blast, and he was able to remove my targets. So he kind of just like sacked me round 1 with lawn mowing. He milled his 1 slumber and of his kaijus, so that was fun. Game 2 I won. Then game 3 was kind of the situation I was talking about, where I had desires, but I just wanted any other card. So I kind of had, because he had Infernoids to stop my play, but I just needed literally like any card just to bait out an Infernoid, just like for a normal summon. And so I just kind of threw a desires out there, hoping I wouldn't mill all my combo pieces, because that was the second desires I had to use. And luckily enough, I left my combo pieces in the deck and got the normal summon I needed. And then I won that one. Then the next one was against the other Trickstars players, where I lost in turns. It was kind of unfortunate, but that deck's just really hard to beat in turns. If we weren't in turns, I feel like in card advantage I was winning, but that's just how the game works. Then the last matchup was against Magicians, and there's no excuses there. The deck was doing everything it needed to do. It was functioning perfectly, properly. I just choked under pressure, and I misplayed left and right in that game, and I missed out on top 8 because of it. So that was completely my fault. The deck was doing whatever it needed to do. I was constantly in a good position, but then I just would randomly ruin it. So, because, sometimes it takes that one play to ruin a whole game. That's all for the tournament report. As far as shoutouts go, shoutouts to my brother for getting me this mat. He said he'd get it for me if I got top 8, but got it for me anyways, because he's a nice guy. Shoutouts to Chris for driving on the way and being a cool guy. Shoutouts to Nigel for finding the house that we stayed at from Airbnb. Shoutouts to Mike for being cute. Shoutouts to Popo for being bae, even though he wasn't there. Shout out to Figgy and friends, because you guys all suck. You guys quit Yu-Gi-Oh, but I don't need you guys to play this game because you guys are trash. And I think that's it. Yeah, thanks.